Welcome to the Do This for Life podcast with OEV of Be Truly Faithful. I will be in your ear every Wednesday, encouraging ladies to do love, relationships, family, nation building, and good sex for life. Yes, this is where you get to do this for life, y'all. Woo! So let's go into today's broadcast. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue where we left off from last week. We stopped with biromantic as we were talking about the different types of sexuality. There's demi-romantic. Demi-romantic does not experience romantic attraction unless they have already formed a strong emotional bond with the person. Anyone can be, men or women in other words, can be a demi-romantic. They don't experience romantic attraction unless they have already formed a strong emotional bond with a person. So it's based off emotions, then they can get to romantic attraction. All right? Aromantic people are people who don't feel any type of romantic attraction at all. But these people can feel sexual attraction. Isn't that interesting? Aromantic, they don't feel any type of romantic. They don't have a feeling of excitement and mystery associated with love. They just don't have that. But they can still have sexual attraction. And we've already talked about what sexual attraction is. And I'll go back to help you all because I know some of you are like, wait, I'm confused. So remember, sexual attraction is the desire to engage in some form of sexual act with a particular person. You know, they want to have sex with this person, but they may not have romantic attraction, which is the desire to engage in some form of romantic attachment or deep emotional involvement with a person. Remember, when it comes to romance, it's about the feeling, your emotions, all right? The feelings are your emotions. Genoromantic, which is romantic attraction to female identified people regardless of one's gender, because there's androphilia and there's genophilia. Those are terms used in behavioral science to describe sexual orientation, okay? Now, let me explain this real quick with genophilia and androphilia. Okay, so I'm sure you all have heard of androgyny. It's the combination of masculine and feminine traits and feminine characteristics. They're usually used to describe characters or persons which have no specific gender or gender ambiguity, and they may also be found in fashion. I'm sure y'all have seen the androgynous style. I think one of the most famous people with the androgynous style is Ellen. And Ellen has basically always had the androgynous style. So now, what are we talking about when it comes to sexuality? There's the androphilia, which describes sexual attraction to men or masculinity. I want y'all to understand this because this will actually help some women who actually were what's called the femme or the female in the lesbian relationship, and they're probably androphilias because they are attracted to masculinity, which is why they could find it in a woman who identifies as a lesbian stud, which oftentimes means that is the man in the lesbian relationship. I know some of y'all are very Christian on here and just do not like hearing all these things, but I promise you, if you just really just take notes, study, and take all this in, you're going to understand some people in your life. You're going to understand some things about your past that you didn't know sexually. You're going to understand why it is, why you believe as you believe, why you think as you think, why you feel as you feel, why you're attracted to what you're attracted to. Many of you have been trying to pray some things away because you think it's wrong or sinful, and I'm trying to let you know what it may be. I'm not here to talk about whether it's sin or not. I'm here to tell you what is, and it will help you understand the people in your life a little bit better. So androphilia is when you are sexually attracted to men or masculinity. Masculinity can be in a male or even in a female. Okay? Now, genophilia describes a sexual attraction to women or femininity. There is a story. It doesn't mean you're necessarily attracted, by the way, towards female. It's just an attraction towards femininity, which can appear in both men and women. Same thing as androphilia. I'm not talking about whether it's right or wrong. We're not doing judgments today. We're just giving information, hoping that you can understand it more. I have talked to several wives who are attracted to the same sex, but they are in heterosexual monogamous marriages. I have talked to women who are lesbians who are in a heterosexual marriage. That is baffling to most people. But you have to understand this, and this is what I'm getting to, is that sexuality is sexuality. It is all about your attraction. It is about your attractions. And when people say that you choose, I don't believe that. Scientists have actually proven that many of us can be either influenced by our upbringing as young children. This is true. as well as we are born that way. That's why you have young children who now, the parents are like, we're going to just let you be the boy. We're going to let you be the girl, even though that's not your gender assignment. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. What I'm saying is that's why you have a lot of parents today that's like, I'm just going to let them be who they are. And then you see why? Because it's very young. And when you look at their surroundings, it's not always that there's a lot of gay people around or people with different sexual orientations around. It's that this is where the scientists have been proving that some are born like this. And then they start saying, well, it's about what you're eating. And it could be some of those things. But the bottom line is, I don't believe, this is what I will say, I do not believe you can help who you are attracted to. I do believe you can have wisdom in what you do with your body. Okay? I believe that. Just because I am attracted to another man outside of my husband does not mean that it is wise for me to go and engage with this other man. It doesn't mean that it's wise, especially if I'm in a monogamous marriage or my husband and I say, hey, we're not going to go anything outside of each other because we're monogamous, then I can have self-control. All right. Now, let me clear that up even more. There is such a term as polyamorous. All right. And polyamorous has been around forever. It is nothing new. None of these things, nothing is new under the sun. We're just putting names to them today. But polyamorous has been around forever. And poly means more than one. Most of these sexual orientations that I've just shared with you oftentimes, or these sexualities I've just shared with you oftentimes, are for relationships one at a time. Poly is the only one which is more than one consensual, intimate relationship at a time. It is polyamorous, is non-monogamous. And it's not to be confused with pansexual, because even with pansexuals, it is one at a time. Your relationship is not open. Your marriage or relationship is not open. But poly relationships have been around forever. In the Bible, majority of the marriages were polygamy. All right. And most of the marriages in the Bible fell under the umbrella of polygamy, but they was polygynist. All right. So polygamy is the practice or custom of having more than one wife or husband at the same time. In the Bible, most of the marriages were polygyny. They were polygynous. And polygyny is when a man has more than one wife. Even in animals, it's a pattern of mating in which a male animal has more than one female mate. That's polygyny. I don't know very many places that practice polyandry, but polyandry is when a woman has more than one husband. So polyamorous is not necessarily marriage. It is when you engage in more than one consensual, intimate relationship at one time. You're non-monogamous. There are many non-monogamous people out here. Too many of them are in monogamous marriage, which is one reason we have a lot of infidelity, because many of us are probably not monogamous as we say. If you look back in the Bible days, most were in polygamy. I'm just giving you the types of different sexualities, the type of relationships, and all these things I'm giving you so you can understand what better. Yourself, your family, your friends, those who you know, who you've seen, and you're trying to understand things a little bit better. The big question with all of this is, I know there's a bigger question, which is it sin and is all that. We're not getting into that today. That's not what I'm here to do today. The big question is sexuality fluid or not? What does that mean? Does that mean that if you born a heterosexual, or you chose, if you want to go with that, chose to be a heterosexual when you were a little tiny person, and as you went on, will you always be heterosexual? If you were born homosexual, or you believe chose, are you always going to be a homosexual? People will say you're mixed up, you're confused, but let's break that down just a little bit. Many of you know Ellen DeGeneres for her show Today, but there was a time when Ellen actually came out on national TV, which was a big deal. Oprah was on it. It was back in the 90s, late 90s, I believe. And she came out. I actually had the opportunity, being in college, to witness the coming out and was like, whoa, what in the world just happened here? That was not the norm. She had an Ellen show way back when in the 90s. Y'all can look this up. And I actually saw the episode on TV because I believe Oprah played the therapist who was talking to her about her sexuality. All this time, they would have Ellen on that show being in androgynous apparel and whatnot and being herself, but her interest was in men. And so she came out on the show, was a big thing. And shortly thereafter, of course, her show was canceled. Although that episode was very popular. It was a big thing and people were applauding her, but people still wasn't ready for that, even in the late 90s. So I don't know if you know this, but you know, we talk about Ellen having a wife today, but she had a wife back then. And I'm not sure if they were legally married because, you know, same genders loving people were not allowed to marry until a few years ago. So I'm not sure if Ellen was legally married to Anne Hetch. She's an actress. I don't know if she's still Well, when we talk about sexuality being fluid, Anne Hetch was with Ellen for years. And then the next thing you know, Anne Hetch met this man on one of Ellen's stand-up comedy tours. And then she ended up marrying the guy, you're breaking up with Ellen, and marrying the guy. And then they had a son. Then later on in the later 2000s, she left her husband for another man. Now, most of y'all would just say, Anne Hetch is crazy. That don't make sense. You can't do this. And it's just Hollywood. People do it in Hollywood. My point in bringing that up is to share this. If she identified as lesbian and then she goes with the man and marries him, start having children with him, you know, people saying, well, she was confused with Ellen. Was she? Or was sexuality fluid? Did it change? Anybody ever heard of Cheryl Swoops? I know many of these people y'all not going to remember, but I'm going by people I remember making the news at one time or another before social media. Cheryl Swoops is a basketball player, women's professional basketball player. Y'all can look these up. That's another reason why I want to tell y'all this. So I can give y'all some examples so you can go research. Cheryl Swoops was very popular for being a women's basketball player. She actually played professionally as well. She was married with a son. And for years she was married. I'm not sure exactly how long. I don't know if they even made 10 years. I think they made more like 7. But then the next thing you know, she came out, had a press conference while she's playing basketball for, I forget what team she played for, but she came out as gay and was with a woman and was with a relationship with a woman, I think back in like 2005. Okay, this woman was very well known. She was the first woman that, if I can recall, she was the first woman basketball player who had her own shoe named after her. And she came out as gay and it was a big thing. And she's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist. And at the time, she made a statement when she came out. She said, it doesn't change who I am. I can't help who I fall in love with. No one can. Now listen to that. She said, it doesn't change who I am, you know? And she said, I can't help who I fall in love with. I want y'all to think about that. Can you help who you fall in love with? Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Okay. Now, she went on to say, discovering I'm gay just sort of happened much later in life. But listen to this. Listen to what she said in that statement. Being intimate with Elisa or with any other woman never entered my mind. At the same time, I'm a firm believer that when you fall in love with somebody, you can't control that. Did y'all hear what she said? She says she's a firm believer that when you fall in love with someone, you can't control that. Now, they together was raising Swoop's son. I don't know what happened to her son's father, but they were raised, the lady that she entered into a relationship with started raising the son together. They stayed together for like 6 years. So her marriage to the man actually wasn't 7 years, y'all. I got that wrong. I think it was more like, she married her high school sweetheart, y'all. Her high school sweetheart. Let me get the story right. She married her high school sweetheart in 95 and they divorced in 99. She came out in 2005, which meant when oftentimes people come out, they've already been operating in their sexuality in that particular, as they say, lifestyle. It was just that they're now making it known to everybody. More than likely, she had already talked to those who was in her close circle, and her close circle already knew. It was nothing new to them. She just came out in the sports world because she was a big female sports figure at the time. All right, so her and the lady end up breaking up actually around 2011. But listen, again, people would say she's confused. She's confused because later she got engaged to a longtime male friend of hers. Now, she had married her high school sweetheart, and then their marriage didn't make it. After a while, she came out as gay, and she said, I can't help who I love. And then when they broke up, her and the lady that she was in a relationship for like 6 or 7 years, she then got engaged to a man. They just married last year. So they had a 6-year engagement and they just married last year. So is sexuality fluid? Is it? What do y'all think? I'm not going to tell y'all what to think. I'm just giving y'all the facts. I'm just giving y'all information. Do with it what you will. So I said, if you stuck around to the end, I'm going to share with you, for single women especially, what I did as a single woman with my husband. And the reason why I believe knowing all these terminology and things are so important is because we're getting married and we're marrying men who is on the down low. Or we're getting married and we're suppressing our sexuality to fit the heterosexual normative or the heteronormative. We're getting married and we're going into marriage ready for sex and ready to do all these things, and our husbands are not performing, or we are not in the mood for sex. And these, people say, well, these are day-old sexual issues we've been having, but we don't know why. And the church is not really addressing why and why we're having these things, because we're not talking about sexuality. We don't really talk about sex unless it's with married people telling them to have it more, especially if you're the woman. You're told that you need to have more sex with your husband so it can stop him from cheating. And then men are told to be faithful. We're not talking about monogamy and polygamy and polyamorous. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about homosexuality, bisexuality. We're not talking about, what we're talking about is praying away the gay. What we're talking about is make sure you have sex only in marriage. We're not really talking about all the other things. And so when we don't fit inside of the black or the white, everything else in between just falls by the cracks of the wayside. And we go living our lives according to what everyone else says is the right way to live. And we suffer for years in silence. Do y'all know the Brandon Tina story? A movie from Boys Don't Cry. You ever seen the movie The Crying Game? I'm giving y'all stuff that y'all can go out and look and research for yourselves. You can do this and find out for yourselves. Why was Tina Brandon living as Brandon Tina? And they said she had a disorder, a sexual identity disorder, gender identity disorder. And she lived as a man and she was killed for it. So why is this happening? Let me tell y'all something. I was friends with a gay man. Well, he was one of my best friends forever before I became a quote unquote Christian. And one of the biggest things I regret is becoming a believer and getting rid of friends because that's what I was told to do. I hate to this day that I did that because I thought that was the right thing to do and that they were poisonous and bad people and who were in sin. And people say, well, you need to witness to them. So if you witness to them and they don't change, you just get rid of them. And I hate that I did that. I actually tried to reach out to him in the last couple of years and I just haven't been able to just apologize and say that I'm sorry. Because that's not how it works. We don't just throw people by the wayside because of their sexuality. Some people are actually more in tune with their sexuality earlier than a lot of us, because a lot of us end up suppressing it and we just go into marriage and we say we're going to figure it out once we get married, and then we get married and we're wondering why we're not having sex, or the sex is weird to us or whatever. And that's because we don't know our sexualities, because we weren't taught that. We wasn't taught about our sexualities. We were taught that you just need to be heterosexual, forgetting about all the other stuff in between. So one of the things I did with my husband as a single woman to protect myself, and I encourage single women to do the same, because I am tired of talking to women who are married that are finding out their husbands are really gay. Yeah. If y'all think it's not real, I have so many stories, so many emails, so many inboxes from women with receipts of their husbands engaging in sex with men. I know one lady who preaches, who's a pastor, whose husband is bisexual. I know another woman whose husband is actually gay. He just married her to have children. And it's not just about getting diseases. It's about the heartbreak, the deceit. So I would rather you know your sexuality and say it up front than you to be deceitful. And I would rather women protect themselves by asking questions. That doesn't mean a man can't lie, but we also got to discern. And this is why it's important to have a support system and mentors. Y'all, if I didn't have that, I don't know where I would be today. I might not have chosen the man that I chose to marry. But I sat down with my husband as we were getting closer and we had these discussions about sex. I talked about my sexual history in my past. I told him everything because we was at that point of exclusivity and talking marriage and whatnot. So it was time to tell him about my own past. And in doing so, I asked him questions, very important questions. Now, I'm not saying you need to do it the way I did. And I think if you do this, I think you need to do it differently anyway. I think you need to be more detailed. But I was pretty detailed, but I'm not saying y'all need to do it like me. But I do think you need to ask these questions. I asked my husband, had he ever had sex with another man? And he was like, what? No. And then I asked him, have you ever thought about having sex with another man? And he was like, well, no. Why are you asking me? I said, do you ever wonder what it's like? And let me just be clear. One of the reasons why I asked my husband a series of questions on this was because it's not about whether someone can pray their sexuality away or not, or even if they need to pray it away or not. It was not about any of that. It was about, I had heard way too many stories in the church where men who had confessed to being delivered, they had been to deliverance services and been to healing services and been at the altar, and the pastor had gotten involved in their lives and took them through various programs to help them get from, I'm talking about homosexuality at this point, to get from homosexuality back to heterosexuality. And they helped them with their clothes. They would help them pick clothes out, help them. I mean, literally, I know of pastors who helped them to speak more with bass in their voice. I kid you not, y'all. I kid you not. This is true. I'm not making any of this up. And they would have them to be involved in activities that were supposedly masculine to help with their masculinity, because they believed that these things weren't done from their fathers as a child and things like that. So this is all the things they've done. They did the laying on of hands, the praying, all of those things they did to help these men to become heterosexuals. And then after some time, these men will come before the church and they would say they've been healed. They've been delivered and set free, and then they were dating women. Well, oftentimes these men would marry and they would be on the down low. They would go back into that lifestyle because that was their sexuality. They were attracted to the same sex. And I think they were pushed or coerced even into getting married, or even said, I think many of them probably did like the women that they married and even loved them, but their sexuality was not heterosexual. And it seemed like it also was not really even bisexual. It seems like they were really living a heterosexual lifestyle pushed upon them by the church, and they were really homosexual. So what's my point? Well, in order to protect myself, that I didn't want that to be my story. So I wanted to know if he even thought about it, because what I found from many gay men and even research was that if you start to think about these particular things, if it's even on your mind, more than likely that's a part of your sexuality. This is just life. This is nature. And it's been studied for years, way before many of us were even born. I'm talking about, they did research for 80 plus years on sexuality and 100 years in sexuality. And they used to call it a mental illness. It just stopped being a mental illness in the late 90s. So all of that I'm saying is, my point in asking was to protect myself. And I wanted to know his thought process, what he thought sexually. We talked a lot about sex, and both of us asked lots of questions when it came to sex. And I know I asked a whole lot of questions when it came to sex, because I have been very sexually active as a single woman up until I met him, or up until salvation. I have been very sexually active, and I was out there with so many different types of people, not just with sex, but I was friends with different types of people with different sexuality. And I learned a lot just from being around the people that I've been around. So I needed to ask some questions to protect myself. So now that I'm in this, I'm now a believer and I am ready to get married, I did not want to end up with a man who's on a down low. And let me just say, y'all, that in what I do now in counseling and mentoring and coaching women, and you will not believe the amount of stories, heartbreaking stories I have heard from wives who have been dealing with down low men. The stories that I got from a young man who was actually engaged to be married, who loved sleeping with men, and he had never had sex with his fiance, and she believed just because he had not tried so hard to be with her sexually that he was this amazing stand-up man, when really he was a gay man. So this is how we can protect ourselves. When I say protect, I'm not saying that it's an illness that they have or anything like that. What I'm saying is that if you are a heterosexual woman wanting to be in a heterosexual marriage to a heterosexual man in monogamy, you want to talk about these things up front and ask questions to protect yourselves the best you can do, and make sure you have mentors and support systems in place. I had that. So whatever I missed, I had mentors who could see for me. So whatever I missed, I had a support system who could see for me. Most of the wives I've talked to did not have that. Most of them did not have a strong support system or mentors to help them to read these people, these men coming into their lives that they're bringing, say like, hey, I want to marry this guy. What do you think of him? So I really, really, really encourage that. But that is the main reason I asked my husband that question. I did not want that to be my story. And I have been seeing so many ladies have that as their story. And even now today, after 14 years of marriage, I am dealing with women who that is their story. But something that I've learned from gay men in the past. And what I learned was that oftentimes these men do not believe that they chose this lifestyle. Number one, they believe they were born this way. And many of them have tried to pray it away. They tried to stop the attractions. They've tried to marry and have children to suppress it. That was their deliverance, by getting married and having children. I learned this from a lot of gay men when they were engaging with those of the same sex who had wives. Now, it may be despicable to think of and to talk about, but this is why these discussions need to be had. And this is why single women who are especially heterosexual want to marry men and have children with, they need to know this, because there's some husbands out there who have children that are sleeping with men. I have another Facebook friend who contracted HIV from her husband, and the church still wanted her to stay married to him. Said you need to pray it away. I was disgusted by their counsel. The counsel was absolutely horrible. You want her to stay married to a gay man because so that she don't end up divorced, and so it won't look bad because God hates divorce. Well, you know what? God also hates a lying tongue. I'm sure you all have heard of the story how Stella got her groove back, and the real life story of that from Terry McMillan, and how her husband came out as gay after they were married. Y'all can look up all of this stuff that I'm telling you. And this is why the discussions need to be had, because we're sending women into marriage, preparing them for marriage, telling them to do all these things to get married. And we're not asking the right questions with these men. We're not talking about sexuality. So those are the questions I asked my husband. I watched him as he answered. I did not ask him these questions over the phone. I asked him these questions in person. I wanted to see his demeanor. I wanted to hear his words and see him speak them. I wanted to see how he reacted and responded to the questions I was asking. That was a lot more than that, but those are the main questions I asked him. We need to be honest about sexuality. We need to talk about it more. We need to have discussions on it. Stop just putting everything under the umbrella of sin and sweep it under the rug. It don't go away like that, people. It's not the end of the story, because people are getting married to appease the modern day church, and they're having children, and they're on the down low, and this needs to stop. Why am I doing this broadcast and going ahead taking my time with it? Even though I really feel like I rushed through it. It's a lot of information. I'm doing this because I'm tired of the stories of women finding out about their husbands later on. This is not an attack on men and their sexuality, by the way. It's simply that a lot of us are at fault for that too, because we don't create an atmosphere where you can come through and ask questions about your sexuality and get help with that. What we do instead is we browbeat you, we beat you with the Bible and tell you it's wrong, and we pray and try to pray it out of you and lay hands on you. We don't give you a chance to even find out. So what ends up happening? In the end, you just go on and live your life on the down low. We don't make ourselves available enough to research, to find out, to go outside of just the Bible. These discussions have to be had. You got to have these discussions with your children. You got to have these discussions with people while they're single. You got to have these discussions, and they're not having sex anymore. And why is my husband not interested? And why is he always masturbating? I catch him masturbating. Why is this? And why is that? Sexualities. It's real. It is something that many have. It's been around. It's nothing new. Why do you think those men had all of those women that they married? Not just to build. It wasn't just to build. It was also sex. And they didn't want to have sex with just one woman for the rest of their lives. Well, at least they were upfront about it. We don't need to be marrying men that really are non-monogamous. If we want monogamy, we need to stop this. Some people are not just don't need to be married. I'm not saying they don't need to be in relationships. I'm saying they do not need to enter into monogamous marriages with heterosexual people if that's not what they and who they are. You need to know this up front so you can make the decision. It's not fair for these things to be hidden, or they're not coming out with it, or they're lying, or they're even afraid to come out with it, and then you get married and you find out differently. This stuff is serious. Y'all think, well, it's not in my surroundings. It's not, it's not my thing, or I don't know anybody like that. You don't know what people are struggling with. This is one thing I have learned in doing ministerial counseling. You never know. I have counseled women who are pastors' wives of ministries some of you have heard of, and they have caught dick pics in their husbands' phones. I know of pastors' wives or women in ministry who've written books that some of you may know, that they sent me the tracking device on their husband's vehicle, the reports that showed he had went to places to be with other men and sometimes other women. And I'm so glad and grateful for the mentors I've had and the support system I had to help me in choosing a man to marry, that we can be open and honest in our marriage. And I wish that for most, that you have open and honesty, that you talk about sex and sexuality, that you talk about these things so you don't enter into covenant with someone and find out later that they're not really who they say they were, that they were afraid to come out and share because of how it's not talked about. And if it is talked about, it's bashing, it's putting down. No one likes to be put down and bashed. We're not talking about whether it's sin or not. We're talking about having the discussion, people. We're talking about having the discussion. So I hope you take this information, study it more. Ask me questions if you need to. Reach out, set an appointment, go to workwithoev.com if you've been dealing with sexuality issues and whatnot. Let's talk. Make an appointment with me. Let's talk about this. At this point, I just want to talk to you about the types of sexuality. And there are more. That's not even all, y'all. Do you know there's more? When you get into cisgender, non-binary, binary, it's more. It's not even. I was trying to give you the basics. The basic. Hopefully you will sign up for my Sex for Ladies class when it happens again. It's not going to happen the next couple months, but you can go and get on the waiting list if you want to know more about it. sexforladies.com. Go sign up there to be on the waiting list for when that class opens again. If you need to set an appointment with me, go to workwithoev.com, and set up an appointment with me. And I'm out today, y'all. Thank you, Ben Sound, for the music. Thank you for tuning into another broadcast. I'll be back in your ear next Wednesday. As I said, I'm committed to doing this every Wednesday, no matter how long it takes. Much love. Do this for life broadcast, y'all.